Welcome back for yet another message from the Little Church world. If you are coming for the first time to watch our videos, I want to thank you and welcome you. For those of you returning, welcome back. We are continuing to explore the great riches and truths that the Bible offers and finding ways to practically apply those to our lives. Spend some time with us over the next 20 or so minutes as we explore yet another practical truth that the Bible can offer us this week.
Welcome to the second in the TLC World series that looks at the issues that present a challenge to Christians as they share God's truth with non-believers. This is not to suggest that the Christian faith itself cannot meet these challenges, because the answers are there and clear. It's just that such statements can present challenges to Christians who may not have ready answers at their disposal. One purpose then with these messages is to point Christians to the answers so that they can deal with the challenging statements that are made by non-believers or skeptics. My aim is to provide responses that are logical, well-researched and grounded in the Bible. In doing so, I hope to achieve a second purpose, which is to address issues that may be troubling those of you who are not yet believers, so that you can be sure that becoming a Christian does not involve you in committing intellectual suicide, as Christian apologist, evangelist and writer Josh McDowell puts it. This week I want to deal with the statement that Christianity is irrelevant because science explains everything. This statement, or a variation of it, is one often used by non-believers and skeptical people alike. There's little wonder, because the media often supports the idea that science has all the answers. So, for example, the media will frequently report as a fact that scientists have discovered early man existed a certain number of hundreds of thousands of years ago. What the media fail to tell us, however, is that this fact is actually still speculation. Evidence of this is that scientists themselves cannot agree on the dating of man's origin. Their claims actually range from 160,000 to 500,000 years, and all are presented as facts and are reported in the media as such. Now, common sense tells us that the reason these various claims are so wildly different is because scientists don't actually know when the first humans roamed the earth. In fact, until proof can be provided, their claims are nothing more than speculative guesswork. You may not have known the extent of the disagreement that exists in this one issue alone in the scientific community, but I hope this single example helps you to realize that science is not as exact as its supporters would like us to believe. I'd like to discuss two other claims of science that are frequently employed to challenge the Christian faith, and show you that these claims are also based on nothing more than speculation. The first is the so-called science of evolution, which is used to challenge the biblical account of creation, and the second is the use of carbon dating to arrive at the age of the earth, which is used to dispute the age of the earth as given in the book of Genesis. My purpose in this is to place a major question mark over areas which some people claim science provides all the answers. I'll then go on to look at aspects of human existence for which science just has no answers. I hope to show that science cannot and does not explain everything, and does not in any way render Christianity irrelevant. Let me make it clear, though, that I am not a critic of science as a discipline. It's been responsible for much that is beneficial to humans. What I am a critic of is those who would use science to discredit the Christian faith on the basis of flimsy evidence or pure speculation that is dressed up as fact. So, is evolution a science? Listening to the media, one would think so. I want to open with a quote from Michael Hoots. He holds a PhD in nuclear engineering from MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and has received numerous awards, including the NASA Certificate of Appreciation for Exceptional Leadership. This is what he has to say about evolution. One of the greatest deceptions perpetrated by atheists and humanists is that the theory of evolution is somehow science. The reality is that evolution has nothing to do with science, but is merely a tenet of certain false religions opposed to God. It is important for Christians to realize that evolution is simply another erroneous belief, and that they need not be intimidated into believing that the theory is supported by true science. There are many reasons why the notion of evolution does not qualify as science. I'll just mention one as an example. It is one which is concerned with the difference between microevolution and macroevolution. Now, microevolution is a fact of life. This means that man and animals can and do adapt to their environment. One example is the house sparrow in the USA. While they are the same species, those in the north of the USA tend to be bigger than those in the south. These differences can be explained through a process called natural selection, because the north of the USA is colder than the south, and larger birds are able to endure cold weather better than smaller birds. I can also relate an example from my own experience. For most of my adult life, I've been a regular in the gym working out with weights. When I work out with heavy weights, my muscles get bigger to cope with the load. And then I lose size when I use lower or no weights. All that is happening is that my body is adapting to the environment I'm placing it in. In the same way that the house sparrows in the USA have adapted to their environments, we humans also adapt to ours. So microevolution is a scientific fact because we can observe it, and the ability to observe something is central to science. However, macroevolution, which is what scientists mean when they talk about evolution, is not a fact. Macroevolution, which scientists believe to be a totally random process, implies that microevolution, over a long period of time, results through random mutations into a change of species. So, for example, a pig becomes an elephant, and an ape becomes a man. I think most everyone will have heard that man is descended from apes. The problem with this is that not one fossil has ever been found to show one species transitioning to another. Neither do we find these transitionals, as they are called, walking, flying, or swimming around on this earth today. Lord Zuckerman, eminent author, zoologist and former professor of anatomy at the University of Birmingham, said it all when he wrote that there is no fossil traces of a transformation from ape-like creature to man. In other words, there is not one observable piece of evidence to support macroevolution. So it is just pure speculation or guesswork. Let me leave it to the evolutionary scientists themselves to give a final view on this matter. For in 1980, about 150 of the world's leading evolutionary theorists met at a conference to consider whether microevolution can be used to explain the phenomena of macroevolution. The answer was a definite no. So how old is the Earth? Is it billions of years old, as some scientists claim? Well, this claim is based on the carbon dating method, which we are told is a very accurate way of dating rocks and fossils, and so by implication, the Earth in general. Without getting too technical, let me point out a few issues with the carbon dating method. First, While it is the major method used by scientists to date rocks, carbon dating is actually designed to date living things that have died rather than rocks. Secondly, even when applied to dating the age of something that once lived, the method has weaknesses. This is because the carbon dating technique relies on a calculation of the amount of carbon that a living thing, for example a reptile, contained when it died. It then compares this amount with the carbon remaining in the fossilized reptile, and this comparison is the basis for calculating its age. However, the calculation of the initial amount of carbon that any living thing originally contained is based upon assumptions that cannot be proven. So they are simply guesses. Last but not least, when death takes place, the amount of carbon within a body begins to reduce, and the speed of that reduction is such that within thousands of years, the carbon will become non-existent, meaning that carbon dating cannot be used to date anything as billions of years old. All in all, the carbon dating method cannot be used to support the notion that the Earth is billions of years old. What we have then is a technique that is being used on unsuitable materials that is based on a calculation of the original amount of carbon that former living things contained, and this is only speculative, and which can only give estimates of age in the thousands. The argument that the carbon dating technique proves that we live on an Earth that is billions of years old is therefore just an illusion. So what does all this say about the biblical accounts of creation? Well, skeptics and non-believers may argue that just picking holes in evolutionary theory does not prove that the biblical account of creation is true, and that's true. However, what it does tell us is that we are not comparing scientific facts with the Christian perspective, and many would have us believe. On the contrary, what we actually have here are two faith systems. On the one hand, faith in the unproven idea of evolution and a claim that the Earth is billions of years old based on a highly questionable theory, versus faith in the biblical account of creation, which most would say presents an Earth created by God thousands, not billions of years ago. The biblical account of creation can be found in the book of Genesis chapter 1. Relevant to this message is verse 1, where we read, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth," and verse 27, which tells us, "God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them." Associated with the biblical account of creation is its perspective on the age of the earth and the age of the first man. Actually, there is no verse in the Bible that gives an exact age for when God started his work of creation. But for those who believe that the Word of God should be interpreted literally, and I am one, the usual estimation based on the genealogies, namely the various family trees contained in Scripture, is around 6,000 years, with the creation of man at the same time. Let's remember that nothing that science has produced so far, including the carbon dating technique, has proven otherwise. I now want to refer you back to the statement I quoted earlier from Dr. Michael Hoots, the eminent nuclear engineer, which I'll repeat for you here. One of the greatest deceptions perpetrated by atheists and humanists is that the theory of evolution is somehow science. The reality is that evolution has nothing to do with science, but is merely a tenet of certain false religions opposed to God. It's important for Christians to realize that evolution is simply another erroneous belief, and that they need not be intimidated into believing that the theory is supported by true science. Hopefully, I've helped you to understand the truthfulness of his statement. And for those of you who are Christians wanting to be able to defend your faith, you should now be able to address objections suggesting that Christianity is irrelevant because science explains everything with confidence and from a knowledge base. I also hope that this message has enabled those of you watching this message who have been so far convinced that science has made Christianity obsolete to think again. Of course, if you fall into this category, while you may realize now that science does not have all the answers concerning the creation, you may still not be convinced that the Bible has got it right. You have to decide whether this world and we humans are God's creation or are the result of a random series of events. Let's just look at the issue of intelligent design, that is the Christian position on creation, as opposed to the scientific view that the creation is a result of a random series of events, the core argument for evolution. We can become very scientific and technical in looking at the arguments for and against each view, but I want to appeal to common sense. Suppose you notice a Rolls-Royce car parked at the side of the road, and you speculate on how it was made. Do you prefer the explanation that all the parts that are needed to construct a Rolls-Royce just by chance came together and formed the finished car? Or do you think that someone intelligent has designed and deliberately brought together all that is necessary to create the car and then assembled it? I suggest that any reasonable person will decide that the Rolls-Royce has been deliberately designed and assembled rather than being part of a random process. In terms of the creation, evolutionists would have you believe that the universe and man, infinitely more complex in design than a Rolls-Royce, came about by chance or a random series of events. You decide which is the most feasible explanation for creation: intelligent design or randomness. Finally, I want to deal with an area that science is incapable of addressing in any convincing way. And this is the area of emotions, empathy, and morality. For example, science has no way of deciding whether Hitler's henchman, Dr. Joseph Mengele, a physician nicknamed the Angel of Death due to the despicable experiments he conducted on innocent Jewish victims, was doing something wrong. For the purpose of making my point here, I want to quote from the website which carries the name Mengele, which exposes his evil activities. This is just an excerpt. Dr. Joseph Mengele, nicknamed the Angel of Death, and the other Nazi doctors at the death camps tortured men, women, and children and did medical experiments of unspeakable horror during the Holocaust. Victims were put into pressure chambers, tested with drugs, castrated, frozen to death. Children were exposed to experimental surgeries performed without anesthesia, transfusions of blood from one to another, isolation endurance, reaction to various stimuli. The doctors made injections with lethal germs, sex change operations, removal of organs and limbs. At Auschwitz, Joseph Mengele did a number of medical experiments using twins. These twins were as young as 5 years of age and were usually murdered after the experiment was over and their bodies dissected. Mengele injected chemicals into the eyes of the children in an attempt to change their eye color. He carried out twin-to-twin transfusions, stitched twins together, castrated or sterilized twins. Many twins had limbs and organs removed in macabre surgical procedures performed without using an anesthetic. How do you feel when you listen to this? I dare say that you feel shocked, sickened, and very sad. Science cannot explain any of these emotions. It's not capable of doing so. So where do these emotions come from? Let's return to Genesis 1, verse 27 for the answer. God created man in his own image. These emotions, this empathy, and this moral outrage that we feel when we read the account of Mengelé's experiments derive from our Creator God, the ultimate in love and righteousness, captured well in John 3:16, which goes like this. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Science's inability to deal with issues that have a moral dimension is a critical answer to the statement that Christianity is irrelevant because science explains everything. This is key whether you're a Christian attempting to deal with this objection when sharing your faith, or whether you are not yet a Christian and have bought into this fabrication. I want to make it clear again that I have nothing against science or scientists. My only objection is when the discipline is used to discredit the Christian faith based on flimsy grounds. My purpose has been to expose these flimsy grounds and to address the common objection that the Christian faith is no longer relevant because science explains everything. This is blatantly not the case, and I hope I have managed to make this clear. At the end of the day, we have these biblical words from the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 20, which I believe are central to this whole topic. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. If you're a Christian, I hope this message has been an encouragement for you as you go about the business of sharing the good news with others. Alternatively, if you don't yet have a personal relationship with God and this message has given you food for thought, I recommend that you discuss the points made here and the faith in general with a Christian you know and respect. If this is not possible, please email me on goodnews@thelittlecHurchworld.org and I'll be more than happy to help. So that's it for this week. Please join me in TLC World next week for another in the series, Issues That Challenge the Faith. Until then, have a good week and God bless.
Although the message has ended, I would like to urge you to spend some time this week thinking about what you've just heard and trying to find a way to apply it to your life. If you are a new believer or a Christian, I also suggest that you try to reach out to another friend or family member that you know that is a Christian, that you can also ask them your questions and connect with them. If you do not have anyone in your life like this, please feel free to email us at goodnews@thelittlecHurchworld.org, and we would be more than happy to connect with you. Join us again next week for another message from the Little Church World.